Hi, I'm Beth Bandy. I have been a prospect researcher for about 20 years, and I have been an independent researcher and consultant specializing in international prospect research since 2011. One of the things that I do is offer trainings to other prospect researchers in international research strategies and techniques. There's quite a bit of difference between the skills you need for domestic research and those that you need for international projects. So I've really enjoyed the process of sharing this information with other researchers. Here in the United States, a lot of my clients work in higher ed and have a lot of constituents from China or other parts of Southeast Asia where Chinese is spoken. And a lot of times I see my clients getting tripped up in their international projects right off the bat because they don't really have any personal experience working with the Chinese language. So this class is designed to kind of address that situation. It's a language class, but it's not like anything you would ever take anywhere else. It's not the sort of class where you're going to learn how to order a meal in Chinese or buy train tickets or introduce yourself to someone on the street. We're not learning any vocabulary or anything like that. Instead, what we're going to do is talk about some basic concepts about the Chinese language that you need to understand to be successful in your work. And you just think about this as being a foundation for successful Chinese-focused prospect research projects going forward. So there are other skills you need to learn how to, research corporations and things like that. But even before you get to that place, just understanding some basic information about how the language works is really important. So in this class, we're going to start out by talking briefly about a little history and geography to give you a little context for your understanding of the language. Over the last 70 years or so, there have been some major political changes in the Chinese-speaking world, and those changes have impacted the version, and I'll explain what version means later on, the version of Chinese that you need to use when you are doing your research projects. To be effective as an international prospect researcher, you really need to look for information about your prospect in that person's local language. And in the case of Chinese, that means matching up the version of Chinese with the place where your prospect lives. So we'll cover a little history, a little geography. And then with that out of the way, then we'll talk about romanization. Romanization is the process of taking a word, say somebody's name or the name of a street, the name of a company, that was originally written in Chinese characters, and taking that material and making it in a version of it in the Latin alphabet. So what you see in your database now is something that looks like it's in English. It's written in the Latin alphabet, but originally it was in characters. The process of doing that can be a little funky, and you can lose some information in the process. So I will explain what happens in the romanization process so you're clear about what you are and aren't seeing in your database. And then we'll also talk a little bit about this situation that comes up sometimes. I hear my clients tell me sometimes, well, I've got this guy, and it looks like his name is written this way over here, and it looks like the same guy over here, but his name is written a little differently in English, and I don't know, is it the same guy or not? Sometimes you're actually looking at two different people, but a lot of times what you're looking at is the same person's name written in two different romanization systems. So I will talk to you about an official version that's used in mainland China today, and then a couple of other systems that have been used recently that you may see in your online research and maybe still in use in other parts of the world. So you can have a sense of, okay, yeah, maybe this is the same guy, or no, I'm totally going down the wrong path on this. At the end of this course, there will be a handout that includes a link to a table where you can kind of compare syllables for different words and in different romanization systems to kind of use as a guide to see, I'm looking at the right person, or I'm looking at the same name. Once we go through that section, we'll then talk about going kind of the other way. So we talk about taking words in romanizing a word from Chinese into the Latin alphabet. Well, think about the words that you have in your database, say a street address. You want to be able to take that street name and find its Chinese equivalent so you can look up that person's property online in Chinese, hopefully to find some comparable real estate data about, say, an apartment complex or something like that. There are some challenges with that, and that in the process of romanizing a word, you lose some meaning and some context. And so trying to go back the other way can sometimes be a real challenge. I will explain what those challenges are so that you don't beat your head against the wall endlessly. There are ways you can fix this problem. Sometimes you can find a workaround in the research process for particular prospects' data, but sometimes this is really an issue that needs to be dealt with at the institutional level, that you need to sort of partner with other folks in your advancement office and maybe some folks in admissions, some other departments on campus to really clean up the data that you have in-house. I'll explain a little bit about what that is. It's not an extensive deep dive into that topic. I have another class on data in your institution for international research, but this will at least give you an overview of what the challenge is when you're researching prospects in China so that you know what you can and can't find using what you have in-house and when you need to stop and step back and talk with some other folks on campus or in another department if you're not in an educational institution. And then we're going to talk about addresses. In China, as in some other parts of the world, addresses are formatted very differently than how we format them here in the United States or in the West. And this is a problem because what you have in your office is a database that is largely set up to take Western formatted addresses, but then you have an address that actually came from China, was in a totally different format, and it gets kind of stuffed into your database, and it's a hot mess. And so a lot of times you just need to understand the components of an address, and so maybe like some keywords that show up as syllables that may not mean anything to you if you don't speak Chinese, but I'll help you figure out what those keywords might be that indicate, this is the part of the address that's the city, and this is the part that's maybe a district in the address, and maybe the street name. So you can kind of start pulling the pieces of the address out, and then I'll help you organize them so that they actually will work in an online search when you're trying to find an address online. And then the last part of this class, we're going to talk about just a couple of things. We're not getting into vocabulary at all, but having the right search terms, having the right keywords for your searches in Chinese is really important. And sometimes you can find those using Google Translate, but other times you may need something that's a little bit more technical or a little more specific to the industry in which your prospect works. So I'll help you find some glossaries that may be industry specific. In particular, we'll look at some glossaries that help you find information about corporations, like publicly traded company names of particular documents and things, really esoteric things even if you'd taken Chinese in college like I did, you didn't cover that stuff. So this will help you find some glossaries and give you some strategies for finding other glossaries online that may be specific to your individual prospect's industry or something you're trying to find that's unique to your project. And then in that same section of the class, we'll talk about setting up a little finding aid for yourself so that as you are finding keywords that work really well in your research projects in China, then you can sort of capture those words and have them on file as a reference for yourself so that you're not reinventing the wheel every time you do another project on a prospect in China. You can kind of go back to your list and go, oh yeah, this is the keyword that really helped me the last time. I'm going to try to use that this time when I'm looking for business information or whatever it might be. So that's the scope of material we're covering in this class. Again, you're not getting any vocabulary, nothing like that. But what you will be getting is sort of a fundamental overview of some basic stuff about the Chinese language that will help you tremendously and will help you be so much more successful in your China-focused prospect research projects.